Welcome to Dynamics of Long Island. Tonight's event is sponsored by ICNA Council for Social Justice and the Long Island Regional Committee of the New York State Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. The mission of Dynamics of Long Island is to serve as a platform for local educators who teach about systemic injustices embedded in society on Long Island. Tonight's theme, We the People. Tonight's speakers are as follows. We have Mufti Farhan, Executive Director of Islamic Center of Long Island. We have Jamel Coy Hudson, Lecturer of Rhetoric and Public Advocacy at CUNY Baruch College. You have Mr. Tom Lyon, an educator and co-founder of Building Bridges in Brookhaven, and Imam Khalid Griggs, Executive Director of ICNA Civic Engagement. Thankful for all our speakers here tonight. We ask that all participants keep themselves muted. I have to continue to dual task, so bear with me. People are in the waiting room, but we ask you keep yourself muted. You can have your camera on, and we ask you to participate in conversation through the chat box. We're going to begin tonight's event with a reading from the Quran, followed by a rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. I don't believe our friend Shahid has arrived yet, so if possible, would the Imam or Mufti lead us in this reading? And then also perhaps the English translation. Is Shahid here yet?
I defer to the Mufti. I think you should ask the Mufti to lead.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I will read the Arabic text and then I'll translate that as well. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillahi walau ala anfusikum awil walidayna wal aqrabina in yakun ghariban aw faqiran wallahu awla bihima fala tattabi'ul hawa in ta'dilu wa in talaw aw ta'ridu fa inna Allaha kana bima ta'maluna khabira. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty says, O you who believe, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, God, even if against yourself or your parents or your relatives, whether one is rich or poor, Allah takes care of both. So do not follow your desires, lest you swerve. If you deviate or turn away, then Allah is aware of what you do.
We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, when the founding fathers gathered together in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention in 1787 and etched these words across the pages of history, they set out to create a standard. These men sought to establish America as a model of democracy, of inclusivity, all these states united, all these voices represented, all lives mattered. Yet in a cruel sense of irony, these same men making proclamations and arguments for liberty and freedom were violently oppressing human life. As they wrote their words, the blood of indigenous people flowed like a river. The cries of Black mothers separated from their children and forced into slavery could be heard from the northern tips of Maine to the most southern parts of Georgia. We, the people. We? Does that we include me? Thankfully, some women stopped by history. It's safe to say that the founding fathers, as wise and insightful as those men were, they were men, and men mess up. History, her story demonstrates that time after time, men mess up and God will raise up women to save the world from man's foolishness. God raised up Sojourner Truth to advocate for women and the abolition of slavery. God raised up Harriet Tubman to get Black bodies on that train headed towards freedom on the Underground Railroad. God raised up Fannie Lou Hamer to organize poor communities. God raised up Coretta Scott King and Dr. Betty Shabazz. Lord, I get happy when I think about the good women that you raised. Now, occasionally, a good man will stop by. They don't come too often, beloved, which is why we need to acknowledge them when they do come. And not too long ago, there was a man, and oh, I just want to tell you about him. He never held a public office. He didn't have a lot of money. He went all across the United States. He went all over the world, as a matter of fact, serving others. And he famously stated that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And he dedicated his life to speed up that day when justice would roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Oh, yes, I'm talking about a man. And that man was a king. Now, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a king, not just because of his name, but because of his standards. He was a king because he carried a cross. And that cross required him to speak truth to power. Dr. King's commitment to the teachings of Jesus Christ made him a king. He understood that his assignment was divinely inspired, and he loved his oppressors past their sin and ignorance. During his life, he was arrested. He was beaten. Oh, he suffered tremendously. And on April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. But before he died, he started a campaign. See, Dr. King saw that after securing civil rights legislation and voting rights legislation, there was a need to address systems that created poverty. So in 1968, Dr. King and many others, they called for a revolution of values in America. They sought to build a broad fusion movement that could unite poor and impacted communities across the country. And their name was a direct cry from the underside of history, the Poor People's Campaign. Now, I know some of you might say, hey, listen, I came here tonight to learn about the dynamics of Long Island. Well, let me tell you something. Dr. King knew something about the dynamics of Long Island. Yes, in December of 1962, Dr. King stopped by Long Island at the Garden City Hotel, spoke to the Long Island Committee for Human Rights. And in May 1965, Dr. King stopped by rallies in Hempstead, Inwood, Long Beach, Lakeview, and West Hempstead to boycott segregated schools. Dr. King also stopped by Queens College. My father went to Queens College in May 1965. Dr. King stopped by Hofstra University in 1965. Dr. King stopped by the South Shore of Long Island and Fire Island. There he is on a bicycle in 1967. And he stopped by South Side Middle School in Rockville Center in 1968 to speak about the war in Vietnam. So Dr. King was very aware of the dynamics of Long Island. And Dr. King came here in 1965. That's the picture on the right you'll see. He spoke at various rallies taking place to address the struggle to access quality education. And that struggle that Dr. King was partaking in 1965, it continues today. I'm going to show you all a map right now. These are the 125 school districts on Long Island, and each is its own little kingdom with its own board of elections, superintendents, hiring processes. It's safe to say that we have a system right now on Long Island where the quality of education is tied to real estate taxes. I want you to look at this map and look how this particular outlet rates the quality of the schools. Note the ones in red and orange. Note the ones in blue and light green. Where you live will determine the kind of school your child will go to, and the value of that house and the houses in those communities will impact the resources that are available in the schools that children attend. And why does that matter? Well, because Whitney Houston said it best: the children are our future. We need to teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Whitney Houston could say. And if you know, there's a version of that song by Brother Randy Watson of Queens that I also like. And all I'll say is that boy's good. If you know, then you know. But if you know school is where children learn. It's where the next generation starts to explore and learn how to become members of this society. And there are so many students, young people on Long Island that are starting life with disadvantages through no fault of their own. They're being born in their families, houses, communities, doing their best to try to provide, working job to job, paycheck to paycheck to try to provide a quality life for their children. But there's a struggle, there's something that's happening. This is when we need to dig deeper and see that there are systemic practices and systems that have created these dynamics on Long Island. Newsday, our local news outlet on Long Island, did a 3-year undercover investigation. And they found evidence of widespread, and I quote, widespread separate and unequal treatment of minority potential home buyers and minority communities on Long Island. Newsday sent in hidden cameras with different couples, same qualifications, same credit scores, and these different brokerages were racially steering communities on Long Island. And this is not new. Right, Long Island, when it was created in certain communities, William Levitt's model suburban houses, when GIs were coming home, Black veterans weren't able to get access to the homes of Long Island. And Long Island has this history of these lines of demarcation. All one must do is go south of some train tracks and you find yourself in a different community. And thankfully, God's raised up some women on Long Island that have fought against these systems. And I just want to tell you about a few. I want to tell you about Dr. Hazel Dukes. Dr. Dukes is a native of Alabama, moved to Roslyn in 1956. And when she arrived on Long Island, she involved herself in fights against housing discrimination and eventually helped to elect the first Black member of the Roslyn School Board. She's currently right now a lifelong activist and is the president of the NAACP New York State Conference, member of the organization's National Board of Directors. Here she is in 1968. At this point in her career, she's a supervisor of transportation, and she's speaking at a public hearing about the need to improve bus services to disadvantaged neighborhoods. We thank you, Dr. Dukes, for your work. I want to tell you about Dr. Frances Watkins, who is no more, but I had an opportunity to meet her while she lived. I met Dr. Watkins when she was the advisor for the Islip-Town NAACP Youth Council, and we affectionately called her Granny Franny. And Dr. Watkins was an Africana scholar. She lived in Kings Park in a house she purchased with her husband in the early 60s. And in their early days, the neighbors were not very nice. If you read this New York Times article, she speaks about how in her early days there with her husband, the neighbors threw garbage on her lawn, and they came home one day and there was a cross burning in the lawn in the front of the yard. And Granny Franny would call Suffolk County Suffering County. And I'd ask, Granny Franny, why are you calling Suffolk County Suffering County? And she said, because I ain't been doing nothing but suffering since I've been here. And if you know something about suffering, just give me an amen. She suffered yet was resilient. She organized, she fought back, and she taught us about Africa. In her house, she had all these artifacts about Africa. And I remember I would go to her house and take her by the arm. And we would go on a tour around her house, and she would teach me about Africa and Black history. Thank you, Dr. Frances Watkins. One more person I want to let you know about, and here are her resume virtues. Okay, Dr. Hudson graduated from Central Islip High School, then went on to get a bachelor's and master's degree at SUNY Cortland, then went and got another master's degree and another master's degree, then got her terminal doctoral degree in school leadership, has over 30 years of leadership experience in different schools on Long Island. These are resume virtues. Let me give you an anecdote or a story that can really give you a good essence of who Dr. Hudson is and the impact she's had on schools on Long Island. After a stellar career teaching and serving as a principal in schools all across the island, Dr. Hudson returned to CI, her roots. And right now, Dr. Hudson is on administrative leave from her duties as principal. Her life was threatened by a white male employee in the district. And rather than address the white man that made those remarks and threatened her, rather than change the environment that made that white man feel empowered and comfortable enough, the district put Dr. Hudson on leave. See, there's a problem there. In that school district, there are too many people who are serving their own interest and not the interests of the community nor the children. Most of them don't even actually live in the community. Now, thankfully, Dr. Hudson is from the community. It's not new to working in the community with different schools and knows how to operate in these systems. But for too long, women, especially women of color, have had to deal with these kind of microaggressions from colleagues. In fact, the threat on my mother's life wasn't even covert. He threatened her with death. Forgot to mention, Dr. Hudson is my mother. And somebody's been threatening my mama, and it's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. We, the people. We, the people of these United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. Is this just? The we that the founding fathers thought of, it must include me. If America is to be what it claims to be, the land of freedom, of opportunity, liberty. Hey, listen, that we includes you. You, all of you on this Zoom call today, all of us together. That means we have a say. We have a voice. James Weldon Johnson said it best. We need to lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. We, the people. Dr. King used to talk about a place, he called it the beloved community. And in that community, Black, white, Christian, Muslims, all walks of life, all backgrounds would come together in peace, tranquility. In order to get to that place, a struggle must ensue. There are forces that seek to keep us divided, which is why everyone, we the people, must be active in our communities. We need everyone to participate in this society. Don't think that the voter suppression tactics we see taking place in state houses across the country don't impact New York or Long Island. Every law that seeks to hinder people's access to the ballot is a direct attack on we the people. I'm going to soon put a chat.
Jamil,
yes, sir.
Kindly check the timeline, please.
I certainly can, and I will most certainly conclude my remarks shortly, sir, but thank you. And I'm also going to put something in the chat box, so you remind me that as I start to segue to my conclusion, I'm going to give you guys a link. This is just pictures here, but what I'm going to ask you to do, because I know I got to wrap up, but I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to ask you to find your local elected officials in your town, your school board, your representatives that go up to Congress. I'm going to put a link in that makes it simpler, but we need civic engagement. That's mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating in a lot of different facets. So I'm going to start to get to my conclusion, but I'll put that link in the chat, but just know, hey, it's information worth knowing. If we want to build that beloved community, that just community, there are organizations that are doing boots on the ground work here on Long Island. I'm going to tell you about one, the Poor People's Campaign. National Call for a Moral Revival. I won't go over these quotes, but what they encompass on the left, the remarks are from Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris of the Cairo Center, speaks about how the rise of Islamophobia, hate attacks on certain communities, Asian American communities, policies that are hurting the poor. We need a moral revolution of values. The bottom one is from the gentleman on the right, Reverend Barber, senior lecturer of Repairers of the Breach, speaks about how the faith tradition has a role and advocating for the least of these. And I'm more than willing to work with others of all walks of life in doing so. So with that, I'll introduce Mufti Muhammad Farhan, Executive Director of the Islamic Center of Long Island, native of New York. And we're very much appreciative of having him in this space. Mufti Muhammad Farhan, the floor is yours, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that inspiring talk. It was amazing. You know, I would like to give 5 minutes of my talk to yourself. You know, you were so inspiring. You were so touching. Thank you. You know, and from that, we realized that it's not just the words that are coming out, but it's the feelings, the emotion, and in your heart and soul is in it. You know, and that's what's needed, brother. You know, a lot of time it's just words. And words will only remain words, but when it comes as your feelings and words that come from your heart affects the hearts of individuals. So thank you for what you have just mentioned, and for what your mother and so many of the individuals that you mentioned. You are an inspiration. Thank you for that. ICNA, Civic Engagement, Imam Khalid, the rest of the speakers, it's an honor for me to be here today, to be a part of a small droplet of change that we can all be. You know, I'm always inspired by the words that says that, you know, alone I say, but together we talk. You know, I could just say whatever I want as alone, but when we are together, that's where we talk. And alone I smile, but together we laugh.
And alone I enjoy, but together we celebrate. And that's how we win together. And I think that's our purpose tonight, brothers and sisters, is to be together and united for this cause. You know, as a father of 3 young children, 8, 6, and 5, myself being raised in Brooklyn and raising my children in Long Island now and serving the Muslim community here, I feel this more than ever now. You know, I start with saying that, you know, when we moved into Long Island, I grew up in Brooklyn. When I moved into Long Island after my studies and began to serve some of the institutions, I had this neighbor who recently passed away, an elderly Caucasian woman, amazing woman. Her husband was a firefighter. She had served, and she was in her late 70s. When we initially moved inside the community, it was different. You know, it was a different face. Me being a clergy, dressing in a particular way, it was kind of different for people to sort of accept a new face, a new family, walk inside. And I remember one day I was doing an interview with Newsday Sunday clergy column. And I usually, you know, send some of my writings, and they had my picture up with the local clergy from the Jewish tradition, from the Catholic tradition, myself. And next day I saw her holding that newspaper. And she came out with that newspaper with my picture and her priest, and of course the rabbi, which is local. And she came out, and an elderly lady, just like my grandma, and she came and she hugged me and she says, you know what, I see you with people that I know. And she began to embrace. And a lot of time, no, these differences are because, as Brother Jamil mentioned so beautifully, is that it's all about it's all about us. It's never about we. And once we begin to accept, once we accept to learn and respect one another, that's when we begin to become stronger. I was reading somewhere, it said that when we are united, we are more productive. And when we are not united, that's the time that we become so unproductive. You know, whenever you have seen change in society, whenever you have seen change in smaller communities, larger communities, institutions, countries, states, places, no matter where you are, when people, minds, hearts are united, these individuals are productive. And I say spiritually because I come from that, you know, tradition. And when we are productive, we are protected from the devil. And when we are disunited, we're not connected, then we're not productive and closer to the tactics of the devil. And that's why it's so important for us to be united. You know, as Muslims in Long Island, the 2 counties that we have, Nassau and Suffolk, just to give you a quick run through it, we have approximately, according to the numbers, which Newsday reported, to be approximately 80,000, but we do have a lot more than 80,000 Muslims that do exist on the island, Nassau and Suffolk County. We currently have about 27 to 30 Islamic institutions which work as places of worship. All the way starting from the corner of Valley Stream and Elmont, going away all the way towards the Hamptons and the Riverhead area. And the Muslim community that exists in Nassau County is very diverse. Some of the earliest institutions or mosques that were established were by the local African-American community, people of color in Long Island. The institutions that were settled more than 40, 45 years ago. Some of the earliest mosques and imam were the people who were part of the civil rights movement, who walked with Martin Luther King. They were standing with Malcolm X and working for equality and equity and justice. And these are the individuals who laid the foundations for the Muslims in Long Island area itself. And now as a clergy myself who serve about 3 different centers, and I see that, you know, as our children are growing up here, it's more important for us to be engaged. And I was hearing some of the comments that we have to be productive. A lot of time we as individuals are very passive, aggressive individuals. Forgive me for saying this. We stay back, and when something happens, everyone wants to come out, and there becomes a hashtag, and the tweet starts coming, and the post starts coming. But in reality, we're very passive aggressive people. We really have to be more proactive and be involved in the change every single day. And if we're not involved every single day in a change, that means that we're not moving towards the path of righteousness for us and our generations. And I think this is the best time for us. And if we all collectively take upon this, that we have to raise our kids and the next generation in respecting, honoring individuals, not based upon their faith, their colors, or what background or financial backgrounds that they come from, but with the quality and the characters of their life, I think our lives will be so much amazing. But I'm thrilled and I'm amazed to be a part of this beautiful panel of great scholars, great individuals, imams, clergies, and leadership. And I wanted to make that little impact from my side, to take upon this oath for myself that as an individual, I want to start living today a life that is more accepting of others, more caring for others, more honoring of others, not just words, but commitments from me and from all of us, that we commit from today, that I will begin to create more love and respect in my children, my family, my congregation, to begin to love, to respect, to care. And that is really, when we go back to even our own faith tradition, that's what our Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad, peace be upon him, said. He said, Khairun nas man yanfa'un nas. The most beneficial individual is the best of the person on the face of this earth. The one that is the most noble amongst you is the one who is most beneficial to others. Khairun nas, the best of the person, not with color, not with race, not with gender, not with anything. Khairun nas, the best of people, the best of men and women and individuals are those who are the best to others, who bring forth the goodness to others. So I take upon this myself, that from today, we all and myself, take this as a commitment to live as we, the people, rather than I or us, but we are together, we are stronger. Back to you, Brother Jamil. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. Brother Shahid Faruqi from ICNA Council for Civic Engagement and Social Justice, Imam Greggs and rest. Thank you for making me a part of this program and allowing me to place that little drop in the pool of goodness that we're gathering together. May this become a means of goodness for all of us in this world and the hereafter.
Thank you, Mufti. I believe I am next. I'm Tom Lyon. I'm one of the few people that can say I never moved to Long Island. I was born here many years ago, and there were a lot less of us than there are now. And I puzzled over it for many years. I taught school for 35 years, and the names in my class register changed dramatically. I remember at one point saying, half of my class is Italian, half of my class is Irish. This is 1970 in central Long Island. Today, that's not true anymore. I remember saying at one point, who are these newcomers, these Catholics? And my father and my grandmother would say that, because in the 20s and 30s, Long Island was almost totally Protestant. By the 60s and 70s, and where there was a point, I remember in my school where we talked about that, and that 75% of Long Islanders were Catholics. That's not true any longer. So many things have changed. Most people are immigrants to this place with all kinds of crazy reputations. And I just like to maybe point out one or two things. Long Island is the stepchild of New York City. I call this Long Island paradise, or Long Island paradox, or Long Island prison, as it is for some people. And I would just want to continue that slightly. The paradise that so many people have come to Long Island to find was a very expensive one. But if you're wealthy, it was a great place to come. We had the Gold Coast, we now have the Hamptons. But there's a caveat there. You have to be pretty wealthy to make it work. To get paradise, you need a safe, secure home. You need a car or several cars. You need a safe neighborhood, and that might even mean walls, good schools, a really good job and career, health insurance, a sense of purpose would help. A sense of being in control of your own destiny would help. And then the expectation, I think, of all, I think about a lot, that your children can also afford to remain here and raise their families. Now, what's one of the paradoxes also? More than half of New York City residents live on Long Island. That's Brooklyn and Queens. I wouldn't even want to know how many, but I have a cousin who lives in Queens and doesn't believe she lives on Long Island. So we have all of these different dynamics. When you say the word Long Island, it's loaded with all kinds of things. Yet, if you do add Brooklyn and Queens, one other paradox, 40% of New York State's population lives on Long Island. And we would be the 13th largest state if we became a state, even though we have the approximate size of Rhode Island. So people have been immigrating to Long Island, I guess, for hundreds of years for all kinds of reasons. Some were not doing it by choice, but most were. And most of them came because they thought life would be better when they got here. In the 40s, we almost were the ones who coined the phrase suburbia, the best of both worlds. And that was other issues that made it seem like paradise. We had local control, and hence all of those crazy schools and school districts that we have now. Neighborhood schools, family automobiles, freedom to travel, good roads, backyard barbecues with white picket fences, and a government that kept us safe from them. Nassau County politicians were notorious for winning elections by promising that Nassau would not become Queens. Long Island forests heated New York City in the 1800s, and its farms fed the city. Its sand and gravel built its skyscrapers, and its workers commuted there first by rail and then by car, as Long Island became New York City's bedroom. But so many of the things that made Long Island a paradise have changed. Population increases, raising taxes, school, fear of lower classes, differences, different people moving in. And that line, after all, that I heard from the time I was, I don't know, a little kid, I suppose, we were here first. Interesting other paradise, blacks only schools were outlawed on Long Island in 1917. So de jure segregation did not exist since that time. But as we know, de facto, in fact, simply by steering and all the other things, the redlining, all the banking and real estate agencies caused these little tiny communities in these little tiny school districts. So we have this, the other distinction of being the most segregated or one of the most segregated suburbs in the United States. We were number one for a long time. So just we're gonna have to deal with that as we progress as a team here, as we begin to create what I want to call, I'm stealing this phrase now, I want to cause it a fusion coalition to address these issues together. And a fusion coalition is two things. It's a fusion of people, witnesses, activists, people who really want to solve many problems. Many of them have one specific problem that they want to deal with. Many have one particular cause. It could be racism, it could be hunger, it could be environmentalism, but there are any number of good causes that can keep you very occupied in your wherever you are. But we also want to talk about a fusion of these concerns, because the concerns, all of them, have some similarities, and that's what Dr. King really hit upon early in '68 when he created the Poor People's Campaign. Poverty, is sooner or later, we're all impoverished in some way. I'm impoverished by losing my children. My children had to leave Long Island. I didn't have enough money to be that wealthy that they could all stay here. But, you know, that's pretty basic compared to what a lot of other people go through. But the concept from Dr. King, he was building in '68, literally a couple of days before he came to Long Island. He had met in Atlanta in a motel with a group of people from farm workers, Spanish farm workers from California, with people from the Muslim community, with Spanish, you know, all kinds of different workers. And he had kind of put out the program that he had in mind. He wanted to create this poor people's campaign and change the story of America. We were able to sort of hide our poor people. You know, we didn't talk much about them. We did, and we're still doing that. President Biden is trying, he's making an attempt. We're now hearing the word poverty for the first time in many, many years from the White House. We're starting to hear some of those words and starting to realize that poor people aren't really different than us, except they just don't have any money. And I mean, they're people, they're human beings, and we need to be talking about that. I've started to get much more involved with the Poor People's Campaign personally because of a couple of things, and this is a commercial for everybody. We are not asking anybody here to stop doing anything they're doing as activists, stop anything else, but just look at the opportunity. Long Island is often isolating. I don't talk about white. I talk to white people who say, I don't know anybody who's Black. Talk to several Black, you know, other Black people. Sometimes we find that people don't get up and out, and this last year hasn't helped much about that. But the Poor People's Campaign really is focused on three major things, and it's education. And it is very important that what Reverend Dr. Barber, who Jamel mentioned, his whole program is about empowering poor people to take the lead. That means some of us have to step back because we always thought we had all the answers. But it says these are the three things that are primarily what we're trying to do. And if you buy into them and think they're important, we'd love to have you joining with us. We are identifying and developing leaders who are united to eliminate the interconnected evils, the systems, and every one of the things that you're dealing with, I'm sure as an individual, have a systemic root. Systemic racism, poverty, militarism, ecological devastation, the pollution that's destroying our country, and a distorted moral narrative about religion in many cases, where religion is used to put people down and to exclude them. So those are the things that we are focusing on. And how do you shift that narrative, and how do you get people to talk about and honor poor people in their struggles? You shift the narrators. I went to one event where there was a protest by the Poor People's Campaign, and the reporters were coming over and trying to talk to Dr. Barber. They're trying to talk to others of the obvious leaders. And you know what he would do? Take their hand or literally lead them over to talk to one of the poorest people to tell their story. That hasn't been happening, and it is now. Shifting the narrative. The story has to be the story of the most impacted people. And this is not something we can all do individually, but we can do it together. So our efforts here are really to create a coalition, a fusion coalition that's going to make us all the more powerful. But it is not a moment, and these are all his words I'm using. This is not a moment in time. It's a movement, and no one victory is going to change it that much. And just a final aside from an old guy that cried a little bit when he heard this. I don't know, you probably did watch the inauguration. I don't know how many people watched the day after the inauguration. They had a special religious service And Joe Biden, with all that he has to do, President Biden and his wife stopped for an hour and had a religious service at the White House. And who did he choose to do the homily? Does anybody know? If you don't, it was Reverend William Barber. And it's about 10 to 12 minutes long, tremendously inspiring on YouTube. And it will tell you a great deal about why and why a lot of people are connecting with the Poor People's Campaign. So thank you all for listening in. And as we develop this program, we need your input. This needs to be a forum, a place to save and bring Long Island up to what it could be and should have been for many, many years. Thank you all for listening. And I'll pass it on at this point. Thank you.
I would like to greet everyone in the Islamic universal greeting of peace, which is Assalamu alaikum. This is actually a supplication, a prayer for peace to those who hear these words. It is a time that we're living in today that no matter what human organizational capacities that we have, individually or collectively, that we recognize that the Almighty, that our strength individually and collectively comes to our tying into the Creator, the Lord of everything, who is the Lord of justice, who is the Lord of liberation. He is a Lord in the Islamic tradition that recognizes that He is against oppression. The Creator of all declares to us as humanity that He is against oppression. So don't oppress anyone. And so when I listened to the beautiful rendition of the Star Spangled Banner by Whitney Houston at the beginning of this program, it was very touching. It was it was served as a reminder to me, and should serve as a reminder to all of us. When we're talking about how, and just let me pause just for a moment to just remind you and remind myself of the context of this national anthem. You know it better than me, but we know it was a rendition that was put together by Francis Scott Key. And the words were inspired by the flying of the flag, "Oh Glory," that it was flying in the War of 1812, when there was some doubt whether or not this new nation of America was even going to survive. The White House was almost burned down. The Capitol was violated, even more so than it was on January the 6th of this year, that there was question. And now this Francis Scott Key and others were inspired to look at that flying flag as a symbol of what America is and what America can be. That it's the home of the free, it's the land of the brave. And I would just want to start this very brief talk by acknowledging that, yes, this is an aspirational lyric, that we aspire as a people, as a nation, to be the home of the free and the land of the brave. But when we look at the history of this nation, we see that this idea from the very foundation of the country of being the land of the free, that it certainly was not free for those who were forcibly involved in the transatlantic trade of enslaved Africans. It certainly was not free for the indigenous people whose population was almost completely decimated. It was certainly not free for any group of people, whether it's based on religion or nationality or color of the skin and the history of this country. Those people were definitely not free as long as individuals and a system of oppression existed in this country. And so we, throughout our history, have learned that we must come together to right the wrongs, that no matter how much we may hate what is happening to any one group of people, no matter what may be going against someone, how oppressed a population may be, that it takes collective action. It takes all of us. If we reflect for a moment of one of the most momentous occasions, events in the history in modern America, it was the modern civil rights movement from, say, 1957 to 1967. And we look at this movement and we see that the people who were the most systematically oppressed at that time were the ones whose faces that were in the forefront of the struggle, but it took all Americans to come in to join. It was not just the efforts of African-American people that brought about the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. It took all of us, whether it was putting our bodies on the line, whether it was donating cash, whether it was giving words of support, it took all of us. I have to admit, as a person who grew up in the apartheid South in North Carolina, growing up under laws that were very similar to the apartheid laws of South Africa, growing up in that particular environment, it cast a certain attitude in my heart, in my mind, that whether I was drawing from political or divine guidance, there was something that experience burned into our souls, that this is wrong, that we have to fight against, we have to stand against, we have to organize against this system. It's not just going to go away by prayers alone. We have to pray and then get up off of our knees and do the work of God, the work that he has shown to us that we are to do through his revelations to all of the prophets that have come from the goddess of humanity to contemporize, as the Poor People's Movement has done, to build a movement using the best tools available to the society at this time. I've been involved in a number of movements in my life: trade labor movement, anti-war movement, civil rights movement, Black Power movement, the Islamic movement in this country. And from all of these movements, these various movement involvement, it has common threads, and that common thread is that we have to come together in an organized and disciplined fashion to change the wrong. The Poor People's Movement, in my humble opinion, has gotten it right in the times that we're living. It's gotten it right by our confronting legislators with fact-based information, not just anecdotes, but confronting those who are the policy makers and who can change the policy with the people, the representatives themselves, the victims of their policies and their laws, but also the statistics as to how these laws and policies have infected, have impacted, have destroyed the lives of so many people. I want to bring this to a close by saying, as a Muslim, for the last 50 years of my life here in the United States, as a son of the soil of this country, and as a Muslim for the past half century, I have to recognize and have to acknowledge and be honest that the Muslim community, the overall larger Muslim community, was late, relatively late, coming to the table, coming and joining with others to try to right those wrongs that we have experienced as a people, all of us in this country, that we were late coming to the table. And until 1979, the majority of American people could care less about the presence of Muslims in their midst. It was not until 1979 when President Jimmy Carter, perhaps the greatest humanitarian president this nation has ever seen, when he, after the takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, in Iran, by students. Jimmy Carter said, I want to know, because of what's going on over there, I want to know where every Muslim is in this country. I want to know where every one of them. Give me a report. Who are these people? What are they doing? But really, it was not until September the 11th of 2001, when the tragic events of that day took place, that it was not just government officials, but now the American people took note of who are these Muslims. These must be hateful people. These must be people in our midst that we need to contain, that we need to corral them. We can't allow them to harm us and hurt us, as if the actions of those who were professing Islam, who were not living in this country, and whatever they did, now the whole religion, the whole people were now characterized and stereotyped as being against the development of this country and the health and well-being of this nation. This was a terrible affront, not only the religion of Islam, but the individual Muslims who were residing in this country and the Muslims around the world. Let me come to a close by saying just a couple of more things. That those like myself who came, our ancestors came over here forcibly kidnapped from their native lands on the African continent and in the bowels of ships that forcibly transported millions of African people into this part of the world. Recognizing that there's research that shows that amongst that enslaved population making it to this country, maybe as much as 35 to 40% of those enslaved people were Muslim. And so in that African population, there was this resistance to fight against. Don't just listen to the Star-Spangled Banner and the words. We have lived the reality of what happens when the people are not afforded their rights. After September the 11th of 2001, the entire Muslim population, no matter what country, no matter what economic status, no matter what color, what race, what ethnicity, we all became a part of that we the people. That we the people, whether it was talking about those who are the beneficiaries of the injustices in the society, or the majority of the people who are being taken advantage of, and oftentimes not even knowing that we're being taken advantage of. Like the research that Poor People's Campaign has so brilliantly brought forward to the American people and to our elected officials, let us know that there are so many of us Americans who are voting against our own interests. There's so many of us that are supporting candidates, we're supporting ideas, we're supporting movements and groups that are taking food off of our own table. But because of this hideous thing called racism, that we would rather support, even if it means taking money out of our own pockets, we would rather support someone if they are continuing to divide us on the basis of race and ethnicity. Brothers and sisters, we have an opportunity today to put aside all of these divisions that have kept us apart over the years, that has allowed, from the time of the establishment of this nation, it has allowed our division, our fighting against one another, our scrabbling with one another over relative crumbs, whether it's crumbs in authority or whether it's crumbs in material possessions, that division that has been imposed on us and that too often we have accepted has perpetuated the continuance of oppressive systems in this country. But now is the time for us, through whatever mechanism we can, but I put forward the Poor People's Campaign as a genuine fusion movement. It reminds me somewhat of the Muslim community itself. In the Muslim community in America, we have every nationality, people coming from every part of the world, some of the richest people in the country, some of the poorest people in the country. We have it all. The Muslim community is a microcosm of America itself. It's just that we have the same religion. We just profess the same religion. And just like, unless we understand internally that these artificial divisions and barriers, until we bring those things down and come together as one, we will never be as impactful. We will never be as successful. We will never be those people who are pleasing to our common Creator and Lord. There's only one God, no matter what our religion that we're professing, there's only one Creator. And for us to please that one Creator who created this one humanity, who gave us this one hatred that we should have for oppressive and institutions of oppression, you and I have to come together and build the movements together and be successful by the grace of our Lord. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. Said it's been a long time coming, but a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there, beyond the sky. Said it's been a long time coming, but a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. I've gone to the movies and I've gone downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. Said it's been a long time coming, but a change gon' come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. And oh, there've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long. Now I think I'm able to carry on. Said it's been a long time coming, change gon' come. Oh, yes, it is. God bless you.
God bless you. Was that Sam Cooke or was that Jamel Coy? I thought that was Sam Cooke, man.
Forward
Beautiful.
together, not one step back. Thank you for coming. God bless.
God bless.